Today we're back in the 80s, and this time I wanted to revisit some cop movies. If you have anything to add to my list, I'd be glad to read it in the comments. And without wasting any more time, let's start. First up is Daniel Petrie's Fort Apache, The Bronx, a title that does not get discussed very often. It follows Paul Newman as Officer John Murphy, a cop working out of one of the toughest precincts in the Bronx. On one level, the story follows Murphy and his partner through the daily pressure of the job. But underneath that, it is also about Murphy's struggle to hold on to his own moral ground. A lot of that comes from the way the character is written and from Newman's performance. Murphy is not one-dimensional. He is dealing with depression, loneliness, and the choices he has to make every day at work. For viewers who have not seen it, Fort Apache, The Bronx has the feel of a tough precinct story, the kind of police storytelling that was becoming more familiar on television around the same time. It is dated and it has its faults, but for fans of Paul Newman or this kind of gritty cop story, it is still an interesting one to dig up. Sharky's Machine may be Burt Reynolds' best work from the 1980s. A lot of people probably remember the cover from video stores in the 80s and 90s, and many of them may have skipped it because of the weaker movies Reynolds was making around that time. But there is more here than the cover suggests. The dialogue is good, the supporting cast is strong, and the story gives Reynolds solid material both as an actor and as a director. He plays Tom Sharky, an Atlanta cop who gets demoted after an undercover drug deal goes wrong. In his new job, he uncovers a conspiracy involving a high-end prostitution ring and a leading candidate for Georgia governor. And the movie is not short on spectacle either. If you like the rough, brutal action style of the 80s, Sharky's Machine is definitely worth a look. 1981 clearly knew what it was doing with crime movies, because next we have Sidney Lumet's Prince of the City. The story follows NYPD narcotics detective Danny Cielo, played by Treat Williams, as he becomes an informant for the Justice Department in an effort to expose corruption inside the police force. And when people call Prince of the City complex, they really mean it. This is a nearly 3-hour crime story with a lot of characters, a lot of moving parts, and a structure that asks you to pay close attention. I came across a comparison that says it feels like the ending of Goodfellas, when the police are closing in on Ray Liotta, stretched out across an entire movie, and I cannot put it better than that. Treat Williams is convincing in the lead role, and the supporting performances help sell the world around him. It also has a strong sense of authenticity. Apparently, the DEA even asked Lumet if they could use it for training. So, there you go. Probably Clint Eastwood's most underrated film is Tightrope, directed by Richard Tuggle. Eastwood plays Detective Wes Block, a divorced father raising 2 young daughters. On the other side, he is a tough cop who spends his free time in the city's red light district. When a serial rapist killer starts targeting women in Block's jurisdiction, those two sides of his life begin to collide. The killer starts going after women Block has visited and leaves items at the murder scenes to taunt him. Soon, a dangerous game develops between the two men, and Block begins to realize he may have more in common with the killer than he wants to admit. For Eastwood, this is a darker and more complicated character than usual, which makes the performance interesting to watch. Code of Silence is the kind of movie that could easily be dismissed as just another Chuck Norris action vehicle, but there is more going on here. Norris plays Eddie Cusack, a Chicago police sergeant. At the start, he is setting up a drug bust, but the operation falls apart when a rival gang interrupts the deal, steals the money and the drugs, and leaves a room full of bodies behind. That sets off a mob war in Chicago, with Cusack caught in the middle. At the same time, another cop shoots an unarmed bystander during a chase, then plants a gun on him and claims it was self-defense. Cusack refuses to go along with the cover-up, and that turns other cops against him. So yes, Code of Silence still has the stunts and big action you expect from Chuck Norris, but it also has a tougher urban crime story. 8 Million Ways to Die follows Matt Scudder, played by Jeff Bridges, an alcoholic Los Angeles sheriff's detective who shoots a suspect during a drug bust in front of the man's family. After that, he goes on a drinking binge and eventually loses his job. Later, Scudder meets Sunny, a prostitute who tells him that her life is in danger. He tries to protect her but fails, and her death pulls him into a case involving a gambling club owner named Chance, a drug dealer named Angel Maldonado, and Sarah, played by Rosanna Arquette. The film was the final feature directed by Hal Ashby, whose career had already taken a downturn by the time he made it. Unfortunately, Ashby was fired before he had a chance to finish his own cut, which may have played a part in the film's poor box office results. Even with that troubled history, 8 Million Ways to Die is still an interesting 80s thriller with a lot of unrealized potential. Colors was directed by Dennis Hopper and takes us into gang-torn Los Angeles in the 1980s, where gang violence and tensions between local communities and the police are part of everyday life. The film follows two officers in the crash unit. Bob Hodges, played by Robert Duvall, is the veteran. Danny McGavin, played by Sean Penn, is the younger cop, new to the force and much more aggressive. Together, they are trying to deal with violence between African American and Hispanic street gangs. The locations are a big part of why the film works. Colors does not deal with organized crime in the glossy mafia sense. Off Limits is one of the gloomiest films on the list. The story is set in Saigon during the Vietnam War and follows two sergeants from the US Army Criminal Investigation Division. Their job is to investigate crimes involving military personnel, and here they are looking into the murder of a Vietnamese prostitute. The possible suspects include high-ranking US Army officers. The screenplay has a very hopeless view of human nature, and that feeling is there almost right away. At the same time, it is a well-made thriller with strong casting, acting, and direction. And if you still need one more reason, Willem Dafoe is in it. Shakedown follows Roland Dalton, a public defender whose last case before leaving legal aid involves a drug dealer accused of killing an undercover police officer. The dealer says he acted in self-defense and that the officer was a corrupt cop who robbed drug dealers. Dalton teams up with Richie Marks, a renegade narcotics detective, and the case leads them into a police corruption scandal in New York. That is the plot, but the real appeal is not in the story itself. The storyline is mostly there to carry the action, and on that level, the movie delivers. It has the kind of set pieces that probably play even better now, because the 80s charm is much easier to enjoy with some distance. Another reason it works is the pairing of Peter Weller and Sam Elliott. Watching them together is a big part of the fun, and the movie also benefits from its real New York City locations. There are several memorable moments, especially the jet sequence, which is exactly the kind of thing fans of 80s action will appreciate. Shakedown is not trying to be anything too deep. It is just tough, fast, very 80s entertainment, and sometimes that is enough. Black Rain is actually a Ridley Scott movie, and to me it is one of his visually strongest films after Blade Runner. The setup itself is not exactly original. Michael Douglas plays the older detective and Andy Garcia plays the younger partner. They are two New York cops who arrest a member of the Yakuza and have to escort him back to Osaka. But when they arrive, things go wrong, and Douglas's character is pulled deeper into the case. From there, it is still an action thriller, but it also becomes a story about cultural differences, from business and friendship to ethics. There is no getting away from the familiar cop movie pieces here. But with Ridley Scott behind the camera, and with that Japanese setting, Black Rain has a different weight and look.